You ready?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to start with your background a little bit. This should be pretty easy questions. Could you give me your name and city of residence?
Marlene Mitchell. I'm from Muncie, Indiana.
Okay. And since you grew up here in Muncie, could you tell me a little bit about your childhood here?
Oh, yeah. I was born in Whiteley and lived in Whiteley. I moved across town, which is the south side of Muncie when you say across town. Went to Garfield Elementary, Franklin, and then graduated from Southside High School in 1972.
Cool beans. What did your parents do?
They were both factory workers. They both retired from Delco. Well, my dad retired from Delco, Remy and Anderson. Mom retired from Chevrolet. So they're both GM retirees.
So were you aware of BorgWarner before you started working there, since your family they were
Yes,
factory
in
workers?
fact, it was Warner Gear that when I hired in. I lived and grew up on 9th Street, 9th and Beacon, across from Heacon Park. And Warner Gear at that time was on Beacon Street. As far as the front door, I could walk, I want to say 6-7 blocks all the way down to Seymour and Beacon in that area, right to their front door. So I knew the factory existed.
Did you spend a lot of time in that area then? Or?
Not as far as the factory. Back then, parents had a little more control of the kids, so I was only restricted to certain areas of the neighborhood. And then as I grew up and got older in high school, then I was able to roam. But I didn't go that far. My friends were mostly located around the Heacon Park area.
Okay. Did you have any other family members that worked there, or is just they all worked in other places in the
At
area?
the time I hired in,
Or even before?
none that I know of.
Oh, okay.
None that I know of.
All right, I'm going to move on to your work life now. How many years did you work at BorgWarner?
17.
Okay, and then when did you start?
I started in May of 73.
Okay, and then how did you get hired on over at the factory?
Funny story. Again, Warner Gear, right down the street, and me and my boyfriend at the time, which is my husband, we were riding around. I said, gosh, I got to find a job. You know, we wanted to get married. Got to find a job. And I heard people were trying to get on at Warner Gear. So we pulled up. He said, well, try here. Why don't you just go in and try that? So he pulled up. I walked in. And the lobby area, probably just a little bit bigger than this little space we have here, it was full of people, just full. I walked up to the window and I asked the lady, I said, I'd like to fill out an application. And she said, for what job? And I looked around and I said, well, what are they all applying for? She said, the factory. I said, I want office. So I filled out the application. She said, just wait here, took it back to the employment manager. They looked it up, looked it over, called me back up to the window, brought me in that day for an interview, and I got hired that day. And I started, this was like a Thursday or a Friday, and I started on Monday, and I ended up being the one hiring and helping the people that they were in the lobby. So I just basically walked in and got hired right off the street.
Oh, wow.
I know.
That is. How many ended up getting hired from that
Actually,
pool?
they were into a hiring phase, and we were hiring people every week. I mean, every week we had employees coming in by the hundreds. I don't think it was every week 100, but that's when we really started building up our base in the early 70s. So it was like every week.
So this is probably during a prosperous period.
Oh,
for
it
Warner
was
Gear.
very prosperous. There was a lot of employees coming in at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you tell me a little bit more about your job over there?
At that time, I was called an employment clerk. There were two guys. There was the employment manager, George McKibben, Bruce Roden, and the other lady I worked with was Eleanor Schrack. So me and her basically were the ones that would sign the people up, keep the records. I did the filing. I did letters. So that was the basic. It was just an employment clerk to help pass out the applications, process the applications, make records once they were hired. because back in the 70s, excuse me, back in the 70s, we didn't have all the technical stuff that we have now. I mean, I had to use a typewriter, and the filing, a lot of stuff was handwritten. We double-checked everything that was handwritten. So it was busy. They needed the extra help. At that time, Eleanor was the only one that was doing it.
Good. So would you say that was a pretty good working environment?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. At that time, it was.
Yeah. Did you feel like you were part of a community working at BorgWarner? And if so or not, could you give me some examples?
Yes. I do, because the people that were getting hired at that time, I found more minorities, more blacks were beginning to come in. And I felt kind of responsible for that, because I knew so many people that the employment manager would come to me and ask me, do you know this person? Do you know that person? Whatever. And I think at that time we were going through a phase as a country where you had to start employing more blacks into jobs and stuff. So I think that's where the community thing came in. BorgWarner was reaching out, to try to give jobs to everybody. At the time, there were a few minorities, and excuse me if I say black, because that's just what I don't know what's politically correct anymore, what people are comfortable with, but I might say black because that's what I'm comfortable with, relating with my people, But at the time, the country was going through that phase back in the early 70s, racial and, civil rights and, equal rights, stuff like that. So they were reaching out to the community, and I felt good to be a part of that so I could help them reach out to the black community.
Was there any backlash from that, just
Oh,
within the
yeah.
factory?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
There always is. And, there probably is now. I'm sure there is, although I'm retired.
Mm-hmm.
But, oh, yeah. All through the 70s, there were a lot of problems, not just in BorgWarner, but I'm sure just, like I said, as a country nation. In fact, I heard years after I was hired, well, I guess I could say this now, but I heard that the employment manager say that, well, if we have to hire a black person, the person I'm going to hire is going to be so light that, they won't know. And I think that's one reason why I got the job when I did, when I walked in just at that time.
Now, you didn't know about this at the time,
Nope.
but did you ever come across a situation personally while you were there that you felt
No, they were like family.
Okay.
We really grew together. Eleanor and John and Bruce and George. I went to their house for dinners, for meals. It was really a good bonding experience because I was young in 73 when I hired in. I was very young. Shoot, I was 19 years old, so I grew with them. I had my children, I had my family, growing. So they come to my house, come to the hospital, see the kid. We knew each other's kids, but I really never had any problems personally, as a black person working for BorgWarner.
Did you have to deal with any of those other issues? I've heard women who worked on the factory floor had issues with the men. So as part of human resources, did you ever see anything like complaints?
I never saw anything, but I heard. My reason for leaving BorgWarner had to do with the racial thing.
Okay. Sure. You don't have to go into that if you don't want to.
Well, it wasn't a physical or
Yeah.
anything like that. It was for job promotion. I got to the place where I was there 17 years, did every job in there. They moved me from employment clerk to personnel assistant, moved you up, and I had more responsibility. I did a lot of stuff. I practically ran the department after we moved out on 32, and it became BorgWarner. No, Warner Gear, then BorgWarner. Yeah. So I practically ran it. I knew everybody. I did everything. But they would never make me the employment manager. And when the employment manager retired, they brought the safety director over and made him the employment manager. But they did all of that to avoid promoting a black person. They never would do it. They groomed me, they sent me to seminars, but when the job opening came, they never would do it. Never would. So I just got to the place where I got frustrated. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing it anymore. So I quit. And a lot of people were like, well, why did you quit? BorgWarner's a good job. How are you going to survive? I said, you know what? I'd rather leave and have a peace of mind than to come in here to work every day and be mad, be upset, snap people's heads off, and then get fired. That's not me. I'm not that type of person. I was always, and still am, a personable person. I'll do anything for anybody, but when I feel like I'm mistreated, I don't have to take it, and I felt better about it.
That's the mentality to have, if you ask me.
So that was my reason for leaving Warner Gear, but I'd never had any other issues as far as with people, because my location in the plant was up front in the office area, so I didn't have to mingle with everybody out on the floor, just the ones in the office area, and that was good enough for me.
Good. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. What was the best part about working for BorgWarner?
Oh, I think helping the people, really. It was really helping the people the best part, and making friends, knowing the people. Because, like I said, I did a lot of stuff. I was more or less, I was responsible for placing the people in their jobs and moving them around. I was the manpower movement kind of person. And I looked out after them. So that was one of the best parts. I looked out if a person had a disability and I knew they couldn't do a certain thing, it was up to me to find the job for them. So I think that motherly thing was in me. I felt like I had a responsibility to the people out there. But the best part of the job really was knowing the people, helping them out and supporting my family. I got a paycheck every week and getting profit sharing every year and stuff like that. So it was great. BorgWarner was really good to the employees as far as raising a family. It was good. Insurance, all of that. I couldn't ask for anything better.
Good. What aspects were difficult?
The difficult part was the 6 weeks that they put us office employees out on the floor during strike. The factory went on strike for about 6 weeks. So they made all of us office employees work the factory jobs. We had to go out there. And all the office was manned by one person in each area, but the rest of us had to go in the factory. I ended up running the tow motor. They put me on the tow motor over in the S building, locking hubs anyway. The good thing about that, I still got my salary paycheck and we got the factory paycheck. But we had to work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. But the only good thing about it was the money. For the 6 weeks, I loved that extra money. That was the best part of the whole thing. But crossing that picket line, that was kind of difficult, But we had the obligation. I wasn't a union employee, so I had to come.
Wow, that actually led right into my next question. You answered my next question there. But I will tell you a story. I had a woman come in, and I'd like to see what you'd have to say about it. I guess she used to be a truck driver, very much an older woman, probably did this when it was Warner Gear. And she said that one time when she had to cross the picket line, it was the scariest experience for her as a truck driver, because she still had to do her job, but the men outside were being very violent. And did you have any of that experience?
I didn't have the violence, but you know, on the picket line, you've seen people with the signs and chanting and hitting the car and doing stuff. Why are you doing this? They would do that, but as far as anything else, they never got close to me or the lady. There was another lady, we rode together. I never crossed the picket line by myself, so it was always two of us that went. But no, I never had any problems crossing the line, except just had to deal with the listening of the yelling and stuff. And I even would see them out in public at the grocery store or whatever, and it was no big deal. I mean, we had to do what we had to do, and we talked. So no, I didn't have any personal problem other than had to cross it, and you get the chanting and people banging on the car and stuff like that.
Probably more like scare tactics.
Yeah,
that type
that's
of thing.
about it. That's all I got.
And then you mentioned earlier that it was a good place for your family. Can you go into more detail about that?
Well, as far as, like I said, we made friends. We did have some get-togethers. Time to time, they would have like a company picnic or whatever. But as far as getting a good-paying job with benefits, it was a good place to work because you were able to save money, buy a home, buy a car, put your kids through school, do whatever. So that's what I liked about BorgWarner. I'm sure the people in the union on the floor, they had issues because they had to go through contract negotiations to get more money, and I understood completely what they were going through. So I really did understand that. And they needed more money, because I knew what kind of work they did. I had to go out on the floor from time to time to even look to see how the jobs ran. Since I was the person to put them on that job, I wanted to know a little bit more about what the job consisted of. If I'm putting you on that job, at least I should know. You know, if you're a gear cutter, well, what's a gear cutter? What do you do? If you're a material handler, what do you do? You know? If you're a laborer, what do you do? So I did that periodically. I would get a pass and go out on the floor and watch the people run their jobs, so I would have a better sense of it.
And do you have kids?
Yeah.
Yeah? Do your kids remember your time there? And maybe did you guys do any of the company picnics and all of that?
We only did, I only went to maybe a couple of them because it seemed like more the factory people went. As far as office, I didn't go to a lot. But yeah, my kids do remember me working at Warner Gear. They loved it. Like I said, I was able to put food on the table, clothes on their back. But yeah, they remember. I remember one time we had a little get-together at Ball State, an annual meeting or whatever, and they had prizes and giveaway. I won a TV. I won a TV. Oh, they were so excited about that because at that time, we only had the one TV in the house. So I got that new TV, and kids were really excited about the fact that we had two TVs. Yeah.
So you've mentioned that BorgWarner was active in the community, and I've heard it from other sources. So would you say that the company encouraged participation from the people who worked there in these sorts of activities? And if so, did you take part in them?
They did. They encouraged people to come out and do stuff. In fact, going back to the 70s, they did a little bit of recruitment thing, trying to get more blacks, minorities, out. So they were able to try to reach out a little bit more to get people in. But it was interesting. I think it was a little difficult because they didn't know how to approach it, so they had to reach out to black leaders, people like that to try to help them. And again, like I said, even when blacks would apply for applications, we coded the application. So we knew, who was what, putting it in, and then when the applications come across the desk, if it was a black man or woman, they would always put them in front of me and ask me if I knew the person. A lot of the people that got hired there was, yeah, I know them. Yeah, hire them. Hire 'em. But I picked people. They didn't know what to do. But, yeah, I think BorgWarner did a real good job in trying to reach out to the community.
I swapped over. Yeah, we're good.
You mentioned black leaders.
Mhm.
So do you remember any names of people who they reached out to?
Oh, my goodness. You would throw these questions out to me. I really...
You don't have to answer that.
Well, I don't even remember. It's
Oh,
been
okay.
so long. That's the
I say
thing.
the one person I remember just off the top of my head because he's a big name in this
If you say a
community.
name, I might know it.
Hurley Goodall.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Hurley
a big one
Goodall.
that comes to mind.
That's a good one. Yes.
And I'm sure there are probably some church leaders too in there.
There probably is, but I just can't remember. See, I worked there. I left there in 1991. That's when I put my time in, and I said, I'm done. So I left way before the plant actually closed. I hated it. I really did. I missed the plant. I missed the people, and I had missed the money. But I got into real estate, got my license, sold houses for a while, did part-time work at Ball State, and then that ended up being a full-time job, and I retired from there a year and a half ago with 25 years. So it all worked out, but as far as leaders, I'd have to think that through.
Okay, well, if you think
now.
of any names, like
Yeah.
please forward them to me.
Yeah.
I'd just be curious.
Yes.
You know,
Hmm.
that's
But
kind of
they
for me.
did. They had to reach out to people and see what they could come up with.
Did you feel a sense of pride that you worked for a company that played such a big role in the community, or did you feel the opposite?
No, pride.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good thing. I mean, I could go to the store or mall or anywhere and they would know me. Miss Marlene, that was the name I coined, I guess. Miss Marlene, but yeah, everybody knew me, everybody come up. In fact, my husband would get calls and people would come up to him and it was like, oh, your wife works at Warner Gear. Can she get me on? People would come by my house. I was well known. People would know me. And then I got quite a few thank yous. People would come by and bring me flowers or whatever. The one bad part about being known of working in Warner Gear, my own people would even accuse me of taking bribes to get people hired. They were like paying me, hundreds of dollars to get their application and stuff, and that wasn't true. That wasn't me, and I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. So that was a bad part of, here I am wanting to help people, and then they're out there. Maybe they didn't get on. I don't know. And then they put that out on me, and I hated that. That part I hated because it wasn't true. But yeah, it was a sense of pride. Everybody wanted to work there. Like I said, people made good money, and you had benefits. You got paid every week. I got paid every 2 weeks, but the factory people got paid every week. So yeah, people wanted to work there. At one time, they employed 2,700 employees, and I was responsible for placing them and moving them and keeping them on the job. At times, some of the bad part about it was I had to take the work home with me. I would take the big sheets, my manpower sheets, home. I'd have their names, their jobs, people had to be moved around, their phone numbers. I had it on the sheet. I was calling people from home at night, telling them, oh, your shift has changed. You got to go to days tomorrow. They could be on midnights, go to afternoons. That was a bad thing for some of the employees. I'm sure when you interview some more, you might find out that they didn't like being moved around a lot because Warner Gear was good at that. They weren't, some people got in a job and stayed there, but a lot of people didn't. Some of them were moved around quite a bit, and I was responsible for that, and I had to take that work home with me. So that kind of interfered a little bit with my family and home life in the evenings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you spend time with your coworkers outside of the factory? You know, just doing, like going to Pizza King for the reunion or anything like that?
Not really. Not really. Most of my relationship was with the office employees. Now, the factory employees, if they eventually were some of my family members, got hired. My husband hired in there for 2 weeks. My mom hired a couple weeks because then they got called to Chevrolet, to General Motors. My brother got hired, cousins, different people that I knew, but I was just around them anyway. So I never really hung out with the other people. It was mostly just office employees and basically just employment office. Just those few people. We would go to each other's houses and have stuff like that. I really wasn't a real social person. I mean, I was, but then we were just kind of limited. When you had young kids, you couldn't do a whole lot. Back then, I was raising my family. So I really couldn't do a whole lot.
Okay. I've heard that at some point there was a shift from hiring management from within Muncie to bringing in people from other locations. Did you see this, and how did you feel about it?
We did. I didn't like that very well. In fact, right towards the end of when I was leaving, we brought people in from not the community, other BorgWarner plants. And the reason why I didn't like that is they didn't know the people. They didn't take time to know the people. They were called they come in to be headhunters, I guess. That's what they were called. They came in to clean house, to do some things. And I didn't like that. I don't think too many of us liked it because they didn't get to know us. See, when it was local people and more family, we got to know each other. We got to know what each other needed and what our fears were and what we cared about. And, you cared about each other's families. But people coming in from Michigan and, Detroit, different places, they didn't care. They didn't want to know. So they did what they had to do. People got fired. People got transferred. It kind of got ugly. The morale got bad. People were snapping at each other, biting each other's heads off, But, that wasn't good during that time period.
Would you say that that's around the time when things really began to go downhill for the factory?
That I couldn't tell you. Again, 91 is when I left, and I saw that. And so the plant closed in, 2009? See, so I don't know what went on those years after that. As far as union, I can't say. I just know when I was there and they started bringing in outside people, it just didn't work very well for the employees because people were getting terminated, people were getting moved. Just wasn't good. Bad vibes.
Do you want to take a little break?
We can.
It's up to you. It's up to you. How do you feel?
Fine.
Okay, I think I'm going to get a little bit of water if that's okay.
Okay.